Welcome to 7 Investing Now, a show that teaches you how to take a long-term view on investing by better understanding what's happening in the market now.
Good afternoon, 7 investors, and welcome to the Wednesday edition of 7 Investing Now. My name is Daniel Brooks Kline. My friends call me Dan. Please don't call me Danny. I'm joined today by Simon Erickson. Simon, well, you can call me Danny if you grew up with me, or like you knew me before I was like 5. That's the last time I successfully used that. Simon, there are no nicknames for Simon.
Dan, I'm glad to be here with you, and Simon is just fun. I love that. That's perfect.
So you say you're glad to be here because I almost wasn't here. Everyone could tell I'm a little fuzzy, I'm a little red, I'm a little disheveled. We're moving today, and moving never goes well, but we had planned this in advance. So my wife left this morning at about 8 a.m., 9 a.m. to drive our cats over. They're going to be in my new office. The door's closed. There's a big sign on the door, do not open cats. And she was parked middle of the garage, blocking all the access to the house. And of course, her car wouldn't start. So she called AAA. As is always the case, they don't show up when they're supposed to. So now we have movers with a truck full of stuff and a car blocking their access. I have no idea what's going to happen. We sent someone over. There's a tow truck coming. It is all a disaster. But Simon, I am happy to be here, and I am happy to talk about our top story because it is a big one. The European Union is taking on big tech. They're looking at passing some pretty significant rules. The big one is not being able to self-preference. That means Apple is not going to be able to say, hey, you really have to use our browser and make it really difficult for you to get others. Simon, 10,000-foot view, what do you think of this?
Yeah, here we go, Dan. Regulators butting heads with big tech companies again, right? I feel like we've talked about this a couple of times in the last few years.
They're European regulators, though, so the baguettes are better. The coffee's really good. like there's that. But sorry, stepped on you there.
Yes, it is. And of course, in Europe, they take this very seriously. The idea behind this is, like you said, self-preferencing. The big tech companies, this is a net negative for them. When Google sells you an Android device, it wants to have Google Maps, where you're looking for a restaurant that you want to eat at that evening, and then use an app that it's pre-installed to make the booking for it. And a zillion different ideas that are just like that. But it wants to compile all this data together, wants to tether as much user data as possible so they can continue to make additional services revenue over time. Apple's doing the same thing with the iPhones. And if you decouple that user data from the apps and that are pre-installed in those devices, it's a challenge for the companies that are trying to get their services revenue as high as possible.
Yeah, I think it's actually less of a problem for Google because Apple has really made it difficult to not use their defaults. While, we use Google Drive, and sometimes it's actually tricky to get to Google Drive, let alone to have it be the default. But they're talking about some pretty significant consequences. Obviously, this is going to be a roadmap from what might happen in the US. But Simon, what's going to happen if they don't comply?
Well, they're saying a 10% penalty off of revenue for all of their European operations. So this is obviously something that these companies are going to be taking very, very seriously. Huge penalties. This is not a slap on the wrist of a couple $1 billion here or there that we've seen in the past. This is going to be something that's going to be overarching in all of Europe, and all of the big companies are going to have to comply.
So I'm going to put you on the spot a little bit here. I actually have middling feelings about this. If I buy an Apple device, I fully understand Apple Music is going to be featured and not Spotify. And here's what they're trying to do. The goal is to foster competition. But are there really going to be new competitors for, Microsoft Office or Apple Music? It doesn't seem like this accomplishes much other than, making my phone a tiny bit more democratic. And I don't need a democratic phone. I want Apple stuff. That's why I have an iPhone. Simon, do you agree? Do you disagree?
I think it's a net negative for these companies. The idea is to make everything more competitive for the little guy to get their app noticed and installed by people that are using them on their smart devices. Most of the time, people are still going to stick with the apps they know anyway, which is going to be good. I think at the end of the day, the European Union is and the regulators that are over there are trying to keep monopolies from popping up, and these are. Tech companies are generally as close to monopolies as you can get because of all the data and the advantages that they have from that. And so I don't think it's going to make it, to answer your question, I don't think it's going to make a really, really big difference for them. They're still going to be totally fine. It's just this is a net negative for the services revenue line item.
We're going to talk about a second piece of legislation in a second. But first, remember, this is an interactive show. So if you'd like to talk to us, wherever you're watching this, in theory, if you put in the comments, we will be able to see them. I say in theory because it doesn't always work on every platform. But there's actually a second piece of legislation here, Simon. That is called the Digital Service Act. This is designed to make the platforms responsible for taking down illegal content. That's actually kind of the opposite of how it works in the US. I think this is a good idea as long as it's enforced on sort of a due diligence basis. If it's if Facebook is making every effort and something sneaks through or it's extra clever, I don't want to see them punished. Same with Google, same with Apple. But I do think you should be responsible for the the content of your platform. If all of a sudden someone pops up behind me and they start swearing and taking their clothes off, we should probably turn my camera off. Like, that's a pretty good idea. Simon, your thoughts on this piece of it?
This is a challenging one. This is a big problem for all of these platforms that have user-generated content, whether that's YouTube, whether that's Facebook, whether that's whatever, where you can upload your videos. We talk about Seven investing, and that's great. That's content that people want to watch, but a lot of people are putting harmful content out there as well. Now, the challenge is who's going to determine what is harmful. There's a pretty clear line on what is illegal, and that's the same as it's been in the United States. But as you mentioned here, Dan, Europe's Digital Services Act is different than what the Department of Justice did in the United States just in October, which is basically saying you can self-police your own platform. Based on your own terms and conditions, Facebook, you can determine what is inappropriate content that has been uploaded. You self-police and make sure that that's being taken down. In Europe, it's more of a story of they want to have a centralized watchdog that's subjectively making that decision, monitoring and regulating those platforms based on the decisions that it's made. I think that I understand where they're going with this, but I also think that's going to be incredibly time intensive. It's going to cost a lot of money, and they're going to have to spend a lot of people's time making those decisions. I think this is going to be very challenging.
It's really, really tricky because, what's truth? What's subjective? So let's say, and I'm not going to get political here, and I promise you I'm going to steer it away from it while starting in the political realm. There's been a lot of talk about, the election. And if I say, geez, I question the dog catcher election, there's 11 people who live in my town and there are 13 votes. I have a question there. Like, I'm allowed to have that question. That's not illegal. That said, there's a lot of seditious, incorrect, knowingly incorrect information, and that could do harm. So let's say I said, the state of Montana is not real. I don't believe anyone from the state of Montana is a United States citizen. Is that ridiculous? Is it hurtful? Is it hurtful? Is it illegal? Simon, there's just a ton of gray area here, and I hope my examples were ridiculous enough for me to not get fired.
You're still on board, Dan. Don't worry about that. I think that, the biggest platforms, they know that they're going to have to comply with regulations on a regional basis, whether that's in the United States, whether that's in Europe, whatever the law says that they need to do, whatever the regulators say that they need to do. They're going to unleash AI to filter through the content and find things that are inappropriate. And Facebook's going to be able to do that. But again, this is a moving bar, and it's different in different parts of the world. And the EU is taking a pretty firm stance on it.
This is the same AI that produced a Simpsons joke where in one room, someone in the family accidentally ended up on sort of an X-rated site. They had the parental screening, and Marge tried to look up her mammogram appointment, and everything got blocked. So I'm not sure I trust AI just yet, but we are getting there. So this is something to watch because obviously all of these companies, let's call it big tech, they're under the gun in the US. They're very powerful. They control a lot of things. Certainly Facebook, Google, Apple, whether they'll have to divest, whether they'll have to police more, this is no longer a US question. It is a global question, and it matters for investors. This is going to affect Amazon too, though it is harder to argue that Amazon is a monopoly. It's hard to argue that any of these are monopolies, but they control an awful lot. Simon, before we get to what we're watching, we are doing something that's probably the most exhausting, but also the most fun thing we do on Friday. We're having our team calls. Would you like to tell the Seven Investing audience what we do on Fridays? Or, well, this Friday. It's not every Friday. It's one Friday a month.
I love these, Dan. This is where we get to be investors and really just kind of hammer it out as a team, each of our recommendations every single month. We haven't had them run into the morning yet. Thank goodness. We do go for several hours, but we haven't passed midnight in terms of how long these run. But it's basically every month, each advisor finds our very best recommendation in the stock market. And we have to defend that to the rest of the team too, because we don't want to just go out there guns blazing saying every pick is a buy to infinity. We want to challenge each other and look at the risks that are inherent for each one of these recommendations. And so our team calls this a behind the scenes look at those discussions where each advisor is presenting their best idea, and then the rest of the team is quite fairly and objectively asking questions about it. And we compile all of that into our recommendation reports that we publish on the first of every single month.
So here's the cool thing about this. If you're a member, and you can join us at 7investing.com/subscribe, we actually publish these videos. So if you say, okay, Dan recommended this stock and I read his write-up and I have some more questions, well, you can get not only 15 minutes of me presenting with graphics and pyrotechnics, and I think I've got a marching band for this one. You can not only watch that, but you can also ask people who know the space well, ask me questions, and maybe like Max or Manisha, who are in biotech, maybe they don't understand whatever entertainment or retail stock or cannabis, whatever it is I've picked that month. They're going to ask questions. So if you're an experienced investor in that space, you'll get what you need. If you're not an experienced investor in that space, you will also get what you need. Really valuable. We, of course, would love for you to join. Simon, we're going to do what we're watching. We're going to talk about the state of virtual reality. Let me tell you my personal state of virtual reality. I bought an Oculus Go maybe last Christmas, and I used it for maybe 20 minutes. I used it again with some friends so they could do like the virtual roller coaster for 20 minutes. Then I lost the remote, bought another remote, couldn't figure out how to get it connected, and have not used it since. So that's where I am on virtual reality. But this has been the next big thing for a very long time. Is its day here, or is it still something we're waiting for?
It's still something we're waiting for. It's something that virtual reality is in the headlines every year. I've seen it at CES. I've seen it at South by Southwest. There's always really incredible booths. I listened to a symphony in virtual reality. That was pretty cool. Did a roller coaster in virtual reality. There's all these kind of fun ideas of what VR can be. And it seems like it's always kind of the next couple of years it's going to catch on, Dan. But I do think that there's something to this. We've seen kind of the form factor of computing change a lot in several decades here. Mainframes get replaced by personal computers get replaced by mobile devices. And now there's kind of, are we in the next form factor shift to something that's not tethering us to looking down all the time while we're driving or when we're talking to people, but you can actually be a little bit more engaged in conversations, in business meetings, in whatever it is, in an augmented reality way, or something that's completely immersive, maybe for the gaming industry in virtual reality. So I think that the demand is starting to get there. There are a lot of other factors to consider, and the price of the headsets probably being paramount there. But it's something that, there's predictions that this is going to be a huge industry. We keep seeing them. It just hasn't quite caught on yet, Dan. But as a long-term investor, I'm very, very interested in it.
I am as well, but it does feel real. Like some examples of next big thing that never happened, 3D TV. There was no reason for 3D TV. No one was watching like Friends and thought, it would be awesome if the Friends just popped off my television. It's a gimmick. It wasn't necessary. Augmented reality is, imagine you're driving, and instead of having to look down to see what speed you're going, it's in your display. Like imagine if your GPS arrows were actually on your screen and you didn't have to look another place. There's a lot of examples, glasses that give you information. Maybe it tells you the temperature. Maybe it tells you your heart rate while you're working out, whatever it is. Augmented reality is here and it's becoming more of a thing. Pokemon Go was augmented reality and it was very popular. Let's talk about investing in virtual reality. My biggest play here, Simon, I'm actually kind of bullish on Microsoft. The HoloLens has really strong business implications. And I have to admit, I have put one on. I did get to test one at maybe a CES. I'm not even sure, at some trade show.
Yeah, I mean, there's first to look at the larger forecast. It's something that, IDC, I think, does a pretty good job with this. They're predicting that VR and AR together around a $12 billion industry this year. They're expecting that to basically sextuple to $73 billion by 2024. And so by my count, Dan, that's only 4 years away. So we're going to have some pretty outsized growth if this forecast is anywhere near accurate. And VR today is mostly for gaming applications. We've got games you can play through virtual reality. We've got Facebook now has got Facebook Horizon, which is kind of a virtual reality world that they just launched. I mean, the technology is there. You can just stream something on your computer, even on your your smartphone if you have the headset equipped to do the VR, the AR. And the real question to your point about Microsoft, I think, is where does this enter the enterprise? Do we want to start doing Zoom meetings and Zoom conferences where it's much more realistic if we're actually all in a virtual room together? Do we want to start doing training and simulations for very technical things like mechanics or doctor surgeries, and things like this where you want to be hands-on and be there during the simulation? I mean, things like this, the technology is ready to go. It's just we need to start seeing the applications catch on. A lot of companies who, of course, have got relationships with Microsoft could be a great place to do that.
So we're going to talk numbers in a second, but for me, the drawback is the headset. So yeah, would I like to have our Thursday happy hour where we can all see each other and we're wearing a headset? Great, except I have the original Oculus Go headset and it's really heavy and like more than 20 minutes, it's uncomfortable. It's a really cool experience if you're say like watching Netflix and your head is supported. So if you wanted to bring it on a plane, it's a really nice way to immersively watch a movie. But right now, it's not there. It needs to be glasses. It needs to be something very light. And I don't think that's that far off. We're a year or two out, but it's important to note in that IDC forecast, about 17.6 billion is going to be AR and VR gaming. Think the latest Spider-Man game on the PlayStation 4, PlayStation 5, which works with their headset. But you're also going to get about 4.1 billion in training. This can be everything from training on, say, like a construction crane, where if you get it wrong in real life, it's a real problem, to doctors learning new surgeries. That's already happening on the HoloLens. Industrial maintenance is going to be about the same amount, about 4.1 billion, and retail showcasing. So imagine you put on a headset and it shows you like all the things that could happen in your house if you went with the new kitchen package they were looking for. So again, this is going to be gigantic. But Simon, am I right that like really the headset has to catch up because we're not going to wear these like bulky like Boba Fett helmets in order to use this stuff?
Yeah, they have. I think that they're ready. Facebook now has a Quest headset that's $300, and that's a price point that's available. It's going to get even cheaper in the next couple of years. They've got another one, I think that's $120 right now. So these are things that are affordable for a lot of people to start using. I think that there's no doubt that Facebook and Microsoft are going to be winners from this. But on the other hand, Dan, these are such large companies, and VR is going to be such a small revenue generator for them. I don't think it's going to move the needle for them. I think that for me, the more interesting play is going to be the ecosystem that builds out from this. How many fortunes have been made from apps that got distributed across the App Store on Android devices or the iPhone? And, I think we're going to similarly see once people get the headsets in their hands, they're going to want to start building out the games, the applications that are going to be a natural fit for virtual reality. And so the company that's on my radar that I think is really interesting from this is actually Electronic Arts. This is the company who's got the franchises like FIFA for soccer, Madden for NFL games. They've got The Sims, which is kind of a virtual world already. I mean, I think things like that, where a large portion of the money they're making is these in-game purchases. You kind of do these transactions. You're buying things to equip your character. You're buying things in the Sims simulation world. Things like that could get really interesting for virtual reality. So, okay, maybe they subsidize the game or give it to you for free. But if you get the headset on, you start doing these transactions within the game. These are becoming really big money makers for those content providers, and especially the game makers.
You think for EA here, Simon, there's a fitness play as well, where like you're playing Madden and you're actually like moving, your virtual boxing and things like that. Those things, we had the old Xbox device that did that. And do you think there are form factors we just haven't seen that some little company out of nowhere is going to create?
Sure. Yeah. A friend of mine, actually a colleague of mine from MBA school, started a company called Virtuix. It's got an omnidirectional platform. So it's zero friction. You can move around as your character in the game. And it's actually a full workout. And parents love it because their kids aren't just, with controllers in front of the TV. They're actually running a couple miles every day and getting a workout at the same time. I mean, things like that are going to be huge. The Dave & Buster's of the world, Dan, I mean, they're going to spend top dollar to get the best games and the best systems that maybe you play them once for a couple of dollars. But a lot of people want that experience, and those are very profitable commercial venues. So I think that, the question is kind of twofold. One is, when does this catch on in the enterprise? And then the second question is, when does this catch on in your living room for the consumer market?
And I'll point out that they'll be profitable for the companies making the VR technology. It is hard to call Dave and Buster's a profitable enterprise. It is very much not. But I do think there's an interesting play here, and I've done some of this. Sat in the like virtual simulator in a mall, and they tend to be very gimmicky. They haven't worked that well. As that catches up and it becomes a really great experience, that usually is okay. I did this at Dave and Buster's. Now I want the home version. So these things should all grow with each other. Seven Investors, we appreciate you watching. I am pretty sure the comments are not working. I entered a comment on our Twitter feed and it did not pop up. So I think we're having some technical difficulties with the comments, but we are going to soldier on. I will say, I know I'm going to buy the new $300 Oculus, even though I didn't use the previous one, just because the idea of it, and there's a Star Wars game, the idea of it is just kind of so awesome that I'm sort of willing to put up with the fact that it's not that useful, and I'll probably end up buying 5 iterations. This is my 6th Apple Watch, and it's the one I'm finally happy with. So I'm willing to waste money and grow with technology. Simon, I'll give you the last word. When do you think a VR headset makes its way into your house?
Oh gosh, that's a good question, Dan. I guess I'll put the over under at 2023. So let's put the over under 3 years from Christmas this year.
Oh wow, you're going to be borrowing my like 6 used ones well before then. Joey Kline, thank you. YouTube comments work. So if you're watching on YouTube, feel free to get a comment in. We are still ironing out the technology, and we appreciate you coming along. Simon, we're going to hit the home stretch. This was probably the most successful tweet I've ever seen. So Sam Bailey, if you would like to share Simon's tweet, I will read it to the audience. Say that I give you $1 million to invest in just one stock for the next 5 years. In 5 years, I'll be asking for my full $1 million back, but you get to keep the rest. In other words, you take on the downside risk, but you also keep all the upside. This is an amazing question. As you could see from the numbers here, the audience thought it was an amazing question as well. Simon, I was surprised because my answer here would have been like Costco or Microsoft or something that like I knew would be bigger in 5 years and I'd make money, but I really wouldn't be risking my downside. I wouldn't be risking having to write you a check. A lot of people put some really, really risky stocks. Like, do I think Tesla's a growth stock? Absolutely. Do I think Tesla in 5 years is necessarily bigger than it is now? I am not betting $1 million on that. Your thoughts?
Yeah, thank you for the kind words, Dan. And there definitely is nuance to the question, very purposeful in the way that it was written, because this is a loan. This is not a gift. The $1 million was meant to represent a loan that you can go out and invest in a company for 5 years, but you still have to pay them $1 million back. And $1 million is a lot of money. So if your stock goes up in flames and you lose it all, you've still got a hefty check to write back. And so I think that was kind of my framing for positioning this as a long-term investment. You've got 5 years. We know that that's an adequate time to get a pretty good return for most stocks in the stock market if you actually look at the long-term returns. But it was one that and there's no wrong or right answers to this, but I always kind of thought about it of you don't want to bet the farm on this one. This is not the time you want to swing for the fences, because if you're down 50% when it comes due in 5 years, you've still got to pay that back. And so long-term investing, again, is exactly the same way. I mean, the takeaway from this is you don't want to have to use money that you're going to be needing for your mortgage payment, for kids' tuition, whatever it is in the short term that you have. You want to let that compound over time, so you're not worried about, oh, I've got to make this payment, I've got to pull this out of the stock market right now. We don't know what's going to happen in the next week. We don't know what's going to happen in the next 6 months. It's very, very challenging for anyone to predict that kind of thing. But if you let this work on your terms for the longer term, you can compound those returns, and that's how long-term investing works to your advantage.
And we do, of course, at Seven Investing sometimes make risky picks, but we often tell you have to figure out your own risk tolerance. So I'm the oldest member of the team. I'm 47 years old. So in theory, my retirement horizon is sooner, or my, hey, I can't work anymore horizon is sooner than most of the rest of the team, than all of the rest of the team. So I might only have 5% of my portfolio in risky biotech stocks, in dangerous cannabis plays, in things where there's a possibility of going to zero. Whereas someone who's younger, say Max Chasko, he might feel totally comfortable with having 50%, 75% in risky stocks, because if they do go to zero or they are very volatile, he's got an extra 20 years to play with when it comes to retirement. But this brings up a couple of things besides just portfolio and allocation and your risk tolerance. Simon, never borrow money to buy stocks. It sounds like a great idea. I can take a home equity loan at 3%, 4%, 5%, and I can make 9% on average in the market. That is free money, but it doesn't work that way. Please feel free to elaborate.
Yeah, I just think that the punchline for me is that investing is personal. The reason that we set up Seven Investing the way that we did is we wanted to give our best ideas of what we see going on out there in the market, but still hand the torch to all of our subscribers to make the decision of what's best for them. We're not managing people's money. We don't want to be making decisions. We don't want to be financial advisors. We just want to be stock pickers that we leverage our work and time that we put into the research so that people can have a buffet of options to choose from. And like you said, Dan, we're not always picking risky stocks. We do have some biotech companies that I would consider pretty high on the risk profile. We've got other ones that are in cloud computing or artificial intelligence that are really cutting edge. But we've also recommended retail companies, right? We've also recommended a lot of utilities, dividend paying companies that are much lower on the risk profile, but we still think are going to outperform the market. And so if you're closer to retirement, you want some dividend checks to pay for your expenses every year, maybe those are the right kind of options for you, versus if you want to sit for 10 years on kind of the biggest trends taking place in genomics or biotechnology, maybe that's kind of a higher risk company you might want to invest in there. So it's different for all of us. I enjoy seeing the recommendations every month for our upcoming recommendations. There's actually some companies I've even never heard of that our team is recommending, which I'm very excited to hear about. But we're all different. Every one of our picks kind of represents the style of each of our advisors, and it's up to each of our subscribers to figure out which is best for them.
Simon, I'm going to come back to you in a second because I would like to know if I gave you $1 million and that same 5-year scenario, which stock would you buy? But I want to tell an example of where risk may not make sense. So as you know, I'm an avid cruiser, and I'm on a bunch of different Facebook groups for people who take cruises. And if you happen to own 100 shares of Royal Caribbean stock, you get $100 onboard credit on cruises of a certain length, $50. And a lot of people were saying, oh, I should buy that. And one, it's a pretty significant investment based on where they're trading. But also, and I jumped in and I shared this on the board, please remember that there is some risk of bankruptcy here. And do you want to invest a couple $1,000s to get $100 perk when you could lose your capital? And not many people had considered that. So you have to look at, when you invest, all pieces of it, not just what the upside is, but what's the downside. And look, do I expect cruise line bankruptcies? I don't. But if there's a slowdown in vaccines, if something doesn't go well and they can't resume in the spring, it's possible. And would you really want to be out a few $1,000s so you could save $100 sometimes? But with that little lesson being told, Simon, what stock would you buy with the $1 million I'm going to loan you?
Yeah, great point, Dan. And I echo what you said. The stock market is not a casino. It's a methodical way to compound wealth over time. But my company, if I'm picking one company to hold on to for 5 years, is Amazon. For a variety of reasons, we talk about this on a lot of our other podcasts, but I just like the combination of great capital allocation with a visionary leader. Jeff Bezos is a visionary leader that has got his eyes on everything going on out there. And then he executes. He spends Amazon's money well on the projects that have the highest internal rates of return. And then everybody else is trying to catch up with them in so many different fields. I picked Amazon for my company.
Not a bad one, and a ton of optionality with Amazon. They have AWS. Look, they're launching a chain of grocery stores. They opened another Amazon Go convenience store today and are getting pretty close to being able to roll that out nationally. And you know what it's a good time to do? It's a really good time to be getting retail locations. You're making some very favorable leases if you're Amazon.
Yeah, and Dan, how about is internal investing that Jeff does too, right? I mean, Amazon's projects are just like we talk about investing in terms of our money. The Fire Phone. Do you remember the Fire Phone, Dan?
Remember, that's still what I use.
The Fire Phone was a colossal failure for Amazon. Nobody used it. It was supposed to sell like crazy, and then no one bought it. But what was the cost to Amazon? They didn't go all in on it. They tried something out. They experimented with something. That might be a small percentage allocation of your portfolio. that if it doesn't work out the way you expected, okay, you didn't bet the farm on something like that. But cloud computing, Amazon Web Services, he put a lot of money and a big bet on something like that because they were executing. He saw that building competitive advantages, everything that built alongside AWS was successful. So it's okay if everything doesn't work out perfectly. Even Amazon and Elon Musk at Tesla goes through those same kind of things. But you want to see compounding over time. It works internally for companies just like it works externally for us as investors in those companies.
I want to see Amazon have projects fail. That means they're trying a lot of things. They have something like 12 or 13 different retail concepts. There's the 4-star store, there's the bookstore, there's Go, there's their grocery stores, there's Whole Foods, there's all sorts of other things. Now, are all of those going to get rolled out nationally? No, they're not. But by trying them, they're going to figure out the ones that work and the ones that don't. And I'm going to guess more will work than don't. We appreciate you being with us. You're watching 7 Investing Now. We do this every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday, and we're doing it today as per usual with some challenges. I am not where I intended to be to broadcast this, but we are getting through, and we appreciate all of you watching. Simon, it is time to hit our finisher. Sam Bailey. Sam is our marketing director, and she's also directing the show today. Which cable alternative will be the big winner? 11.6% said Sling TV, 26.5% said Hulu Live, 5.2% said AT&T TV, 56.7% said YouTube TV. I hate to tell you, 7 investors, you are wrong. If any of them have a chance, it's Hulu Live. Hulu Live is owned by Disney. If you have Disney Plus, you get a deal on Hulu, you decide to cut the cord, you're not going to go to a totally new ecosystem. I see zero chance that YouTube TV is the winner here. But Simon, your thoughts?
Oh, I defer to you on this one, Dan. You're the media expert. I probably would have voted for Hulu Live, but I don't have the conviction that you do. So maybe that reinforces that I made the right call to hear you say that that's the one that you would have picked as well.
I think Sling TV has the possibility of being a player here as well. They were first to market. It's a really good product. They have a low entry price point and a lot of different options, and the options all make sense. They're really easy to do. But Simon, you asked me here about one that's not on the list, and that's Fubo. And Fubo has done a really good marketing job. So they built their marketing around the idea that they're a sports service. And I'm not saying it's a scam, but it is kind of a scam. It's not that they don't offer you live sports. And I'm sure you've seen the commercials. Hulu has live sports with Baker Mayfield. And yeah, all of these have live sports. What Fubo has done is in their skinny bundle, they've prioritized channels that have sports. So instead of getting the Food Network and DIY and cooking and Travel Network, maybe you'll get more ESPN channels. Maybe you'll get the SEC network. Maybe you'll get access to a regional sports network. There is more sports in Fubo, but most of those are things you can get on Sling, on YouTube TV. The networks, it depends very much where you live, what your access is. So when you're pricing any of these or when you're looking at it, one, you need to look at what you need. The basic $25 Sling TV package for a lot of people is going to give them what they need along with Netflix. And then you go, okay, but I want ESPN. Okay, well, you step it up to the $35 package. Okay, I need the SEC network. Well, maybe Fubo is right for you. I need whatever it is. My wife likes to watch MTV. Well, you find, she doesn't, but let's find whatever package has that. All of these are different, and the marketing makes it sound like there's some exclusive special sports on Fubo, and there really isn't. It's just that in a skinny bundle, which means you're going to make sacrifices, they've made sacrifices where there's more sports and less of other stuff. If you're an NFL fan, is having 6 golf channels really going to matter to you? You really need to look exactly what's in the package. And the cool thing about any of these is you can generally move from them. So if you're a Sling TV subscriber and something you really want to watch isn't available in their package, maybe you cancel and you sign up for Hulu Live for a month. It's really easy to move. Simon, are you a cable customer? Do you have one of these?
I don't have any of those. I'm a cable customer. I haven't cut the cord yet, but that's not a decision that's up to me, Dan.
Yeah, I'm a cable customer, which is included in my new house, or else I probably would have cut the cord. But I am also a Sling TV customer at our vacation home and when I'm on the road. And it's a really easy to use, good product. Last night at our house, our TVs had moved. So I sat on my phone and I watched television on Sling TV. If you have cable and you're paying, I was paying $210 a month, unbeknownst to me. If you're paying that much, these are good services. And any of them work. And you have to factor in things like, do I mind watching commercials? Do I want to DVR something and still have to watch the commercial? That can be a problem. So you really want to look into exactly what you're getting. And of course, if you don't live alone, make sure you get the favorite channels for anyone else's house. But I like, here's the thing. It's really important for me that I have NFL games, not my wife so much. So if she sits down and she wants to watch Chopped on, the Food Network, and we don't have the Food Network, I would be in a tiny bit of trouble. But
and Dan, is it still safe to say that sports content is the most expensive content for any of these providers? I mean, from everything, it seems like the Fubo example is just that sports content is still the most demanded, but it's also getting the highest rates, and it's the most expensive for anybody to get access to.
Yeah, the entry-level Fubo package, and there might be some cheaper ones, but the one they feature on their page is $65. There's a $25 Sling package. I don't know what Hulu Live is now, but last time I was a subscriber, it was $39.99, and I think it might be a little more now, but for a pretty good package of channels. But you really need to look, what do I get and what do I watch? If you have cable, it's about the 15th of the month. We're the 16th of the month today. I would take the next 2 weeks of the month, and it's a weird time with Christmas, so maybe you have to wait till the new year. I would actually keep a television diary. What did I watch, and would I care if I didn't have that? Like if you're watching 90 Day Fiance in the background and you didn't have whatever channel that's on, and you could watch Married at First Sight, which I think is on a different channel, but I might be wrong, and it's all background noise to you and it doesn't matter, well, that's different than, wow, my wife and I every week watch The Simpsons, or we watch Law & Order SVU, and that's appointment, we watch Saturday Night Live the next day because I can't stay up till 1 o'clock on a Saturday. It's really important. There's a lot of choices, and it isn't easy. The nice thing about cable is you generally get everything you need for that one price. But of course, what they do is they take 2 or 3 things you really, really want, and they put them in the next tier. That is how they get you. But Simon, we got them. We apologize that the comments weren't working, or maybe you didn't have a lot of comments. We don't know. But that is today's edition of 7 Investing Now. We're going to be back on Friday. And of course, on Friday, we are also doing our member call. So if you're a member of 7 Investing, we do one call every month for new members. You can ask us all the questions about how the services work. We take you through all the different pieces of it. And then for existing members, all 7 of us, you can ask us anything. We can't give you personal investing advice, but we could certainly share how we would do it. Those are really fun. We hope you join us. For Simon Erickson, I am Dan Kline. Thank you for watching. See you Friday.